The skies above Earth had turned dark, not because of clouds or stormy weather, but because the invaders had arrived. The HFY, a race of aliens known for their cruelty and endless conquests, had come. The Earth that humans once knew was now nothing more than a battlefield. Cities that had stood tall for centuries were reduced to rubble. The streets, once full of life, were now empty, echoing only the sounds of destruction. There was no longer any place to hide from the HFY. In the beginning, humans fought back with everything they had: airplanes, tanks, even nuclear weapons, but it was all in vain. The HFY were far too powerful. Their ships were faster, their weapons deadlier, and their strategies far more advanced. Every attempt by Earth's military forces to stop the invasion ended in failure. The humans were outmatched. They could feel it with every attack, every loss. The war was nearly over before it had even begun. For months, the HFY advanced without mercy. Every major city fell one by one. London, Paris, New York, no place was safe. Governments crumbled and armies scattered. The HFY made no secret of their goal: to take control of Earth and harvest its resources. They had done it before to countless other planets. Humans, to them, were nothing more than an obstacle. And so, Earth's once vibrant population was driven into hiding, desperate to survive. But there was one thing the HFY didn't expect: human resilience. Though Earth's military had been shattered, there were pockets of survivors. Small groups of civilians and soldiers, scattered across the world, had started to fight back. They weren't organized, and they didn't have advanced weapons, but they had something the HFY could not understand: hope. In a hidden underground bunker in the mountains of the Rockies, a small group of military leaders and scientists gathered. They were the last of Earth's best minds, and they had only one goal: to find a way to stop the invaders. But even they knew the truth. Time was running out. The HFY were preparing for their final strike. Earth's last chance to survive was dwindling. "We don't have much time," said General Ryan, the leader of the last human resistance force. He stared at the flickering map on the wall, which showed the alien fleet closing in. It was only a matter of hours before the HFY would launch their final assault on the remaining human strongholds. "They'll be here soon, and we need to be ready." Dr. Evelyn Grant, a scientist who had worked on Earth's top-secret defense projects before the war, stood beside him. She was older than most of the others, her face marked with the stress of months of constant battle, but her eyes were still sharp. "We've tried everything. The weapons we have, they're not enough. We need something more, something the HFY haven't accounted for." Ryan shook his head. "We've already tried everything, Dr. Grant. They're too strong. We don't have the power to fight them with technology alone." The room fell silent. The thought of giving up was unbearable. But deep down, everyone knew Ryan was right. The HFY had taken their best weapons down without a second thought. They were too strong. Dr. Grant, however, wasn't ready to give in just yet. She had an idea, something no one had considered. She turned to face the group and spoke softly. "There's something the HFY can't predict, something they don't understand. It's what makes us different from every other species they've encountered." General Ryan looked at her, waiting for her to explain. "Human potential," she said, her voice gaining strength. "The HFY rely on logic and precision. They think they can control everything. But we, humans, are unpredictable. Our emotions, our creativity, our ability to adapt to anything. That's our true power." Ryan's expression softened. "You're saying we fight them with our minds?" Dr. Grant nodded. "Yes. It's risky. We don't know what we're truly dealing with here, but we might be able to disrupt their command systems. We might be able to." Before she could finish, a loud alarm blared through the bunker. A voice crackled through the loudspeakers. "Alert! HFY fleet is on final approach. Prepare for impact." Everyone in the room froze. The fight was no longer some distant possibility. It was happening now. General Ryan slammed his fist onto the table. Damn it. We don't have time to prepare. But Dr. Grant stood tall, her face set with determination. We don't need time. We need courage. Ryan looked at her, torn. Are you sure about this? I don't know. But we have nothing left to lose, she replied. If we don't try now, we're finished. The room went quiet again, as everyone thought about what she said. They were on the edge of losing everything. And the only thing they had left was hope. Hope that somehow the human spirit could overcome the HFY's cold, calculating technology. Outside the bunker, the sound of explosions and the distant rumble of alien ships filled the air. The HFY were here. Earth had only one chance left. Ryan stood up, his expression hard. All right, everyone. We do this. We'll use everything we've got. And we'll fight with everything we are. Dr. Grant nodded. It's not just about technology or weapons anymore. It's about us. Our will to survive. Our ability to adapt. Our unity. For the first time in months, the survivors in the room felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from technology or weapons. It was the kind that came from within. The kind that burned brightest in the darkest of times. The kind that only humans had. As the team made their way to the command center, General Ryan's voice echoed in the hallways. We fight for Earth. We fight for each other. We fight because we are human. The war was far from over, but in that moment, for the first time since the invasion began, there was a flicker of something the HFY had overlooked, the true strength of humanity. They had no idea how the battle would unfold. They didn't know if they would win or lose. But one thing was certain. Earth's elite forces were about to unleash a power the HFY had never seen before. And for the first time in a long while, the humans had something the aliens couldn't predict. They had hope. The HFY were sure they had Earth under their control. Their invasion was swift, their tactics ruthless. The humans had put up a fight, but it had been a losing battle from the start. The alien forces had advanced with overwhelming strength, cutting down everything in their path. But what the HFY failed to see, what they failed to understand, was just how resourceful and unpredictable humans could be. The group of human survivors that had escaped the chaos of the war had gathered together once more in a hidden bunker deep beneath the Earth's surface. General Ryan and Dr. Evelyn Grant were leading the charge, but this time, they weren't planning to fight the HFY with just guns and bombs. This time, they had discovered something that could change the tide of the war. The HFY's weakness. Emotion. The HFY were an ancient race, their advanced technology a product of cold logic and precision. They saw emotions as a weakness, something that clouded judgment and led to failure. They had spent centuries perfecting their ability to suppress their emotions, turning their soldiers into cold, unfeeling machines. But it was precisely this that gave the humans an edge. The HFY never realized that emotion could be used as a weapon. The plan was risky. There was no guarantee that it would work, and failure would mean certain death for all of them. But the humans were running out of time. The HFY had begun preparing for the final strike, and the few remaining resistance forces had no way of stopping them, unless they could break the HFY's defenses. Dr. Grant had an idea, and it was their only hope. They had managed to capture a small HFY scout ship during one of the Resistance's recent attacks. It was heavily damaged, but still functional. Ryan and his team knew that if they could reverse engineer the ship, they might be able to learn more about the aliens' technology. But as they worked late into the night, something unexpected happened. A transmission from the alien mothership was intercepted. It was a direct order from the HFY command, and it was the key to their success. We've been tracking the humans. Their resistance has been stronger than anticipated. We need to neutralize them before they learn too much about us. Their weakness is their emotions. Destroy their hope, and they will break. The message was clear. The HFY didn't just want to win. They wanted to crush the human spirit. They wanted to destroy the very thing that made humans so unpredictable, so dangerous. This was the mistake the HFY made. They underestimated how deeply humans could hold onto their hope, how fiercely they would fight to protect their planet. And now, thanks to their own arrogance, the humans had something the HFY had never expected: a chance. The resistance team had been working around the clock, studying the captured HFY technology. As Dr. Grant analyzed the alien transmissions, she discovered something remarkable. The HFY relied on a network of advanced artificial intelligence systems to control their forces. These AIs controlled everything from their battle tactics to their weapons. But the AI had one fatal flaw: it could be hacked. Dr. Grant shared the information with General Ryan. "We have a way in," she said. "If we can tap into their network, we can disrupt their command systems. We can make their forces turn on each other." Ryan's eyes lit up. "How much time do we need?" "We don't have much. But if we move quickly, we can hack into their communication systems and shut down their forces long enough to strike." Ryan nodded. He knew this was their last chance. If they didn't act now, the HFY would wipe them out for good. He gathered his team, the last of Earth's elite soldiers, and gave them their orders. They would infiltrate the HFY's main communication hub, located in a heavily guarded fortress deep within the alien mothership. It would be the most dangerous mission they had ever undertaken. The fortress was surrounded by hundreds of HFY soldiers, and the risk of failure was high. But it was a risk they had to take. The team set out under the cover of darkness, moving silently through the ruins of the city. They had no time to waste. The closer they got to the mothership, the stronger the HFY's presence became. The air was thick with tension. Every footstep felt like it could be their last. As they approached the fortress, General Ryan turned to his team. "Remember, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for Earth. For every person we lost, for every home destroyed. This is our final chance." Dr. Grant added, "We don't just have to win this battle. We have to change the war. If we can break their communication systems, we can shift the entire balance of power." The team nodded. They were ready. They breached the outer walls of the fortress with military precision, using their advanced weapons to take out the few HFY guards patrolling the area. They moved quickly and quietly, knowing that every moment they delayed could mean their capture. When they finally reached the main control room, they found it guarded by a dozen HFY soldiers. Without hesitation, Ryan signaled to his team. They sprang into action, silently taking down the guards one by one, using hand-to-hand combat and specialized weapons to remain undetected. Finally, they made it inside the control room. It was filled with rows of glowing consoles, connected to the alien communication network. Dr. Grant immediately set to work, using the device she had built to interface with the HFY system. As the minutes ticked by, tension filled the air. The team knew that if they didn't succeed, they would be trapped in the heart of the enemy's stronghold, with no way out. Dr. Grant's fingers flew across the controls, her face tense with concentration. "I'm in," she said finally. "I've broken their encryption. Now we just need to send the signal." Ryan nodded. "Do it." Dr. Grant hit a key, sending a virus into the HFY communication network. The screens flickered for a moment, and then the entire system went dark. For a brief second, everything was quiet. And then chaos erupted. The HFY forces, cut off from their central command, began turning on each other. Without their leader's guidance, their once perfect strategy collapsed. Some of their ships began to fire on each other, while others simply stopped moving altogether. The entire fleet, once unstoppable, was in disarray. The humans had done it. They had disrupted the HFY's command system, giving Earth's resistance forces the opening they needed to strike. But the mission wasn't over yet. The humans had won a battle, but the war was far from finished. The HFY, though disoriented, would regroup. The fight for Earth was about to get even more dangerous. But now, for the first time since the invasion began, the humans had the upper hand. And that was the mistake the HFY had made. They had underestimated human ingenuity, and now, the tide of war was beginning to turn. The human resistance had taken a major step forward. After their successful mission to infiltrate the HFY fortress, the tide of war had started to shift. The HFY were no longer the unchallenged conquerors of Earth. Their communication system had been shattered, and their once precise military strategies were in chaos. The humans had done the impossible, and now they had a fighting chance. However, the victory was far from complete. The HFY were regrouping quickly, using backup systems to re-establish control over their forces. Despite their loss, the aliens were not defeated, and the humans knew it. The war was still far from over. But something had changed. The humans had unlocked a secret, a power within themselves that even the HFY hadn't anticipated. In their studies of the alien technology, Dr. Evelyn Grant had discovered something astonishing. The HFY's control over their forces was based not just on machines, but on a psychic network, a kind of mental command system that allowed them to coordinate their actions. The humans had no such system, but they had something the HFY lacked: creativity, emotions, and adaptability. Dr. Grant had a theory. If they could tap into the human mind in a way that amplified their natural mental capabilities, they could fight back against the HFY's psychic network. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. She began working on a device, a neural amplifier, that would enhance the natural psychic abilities of humans, allowing them to disrupt the HFY's control system. It was a risky experiment. Most humans had no psychic abilities at all, and even if they did, it wasn't clear whether they could control them. But desperation drove them forward. The resistance had no other choice. General Rand, always focused on the mission, stood by while Dr. Grant worked. He knew the stakes were high. If the experiment worked, it could turn the tide of the war. But if it failed, they would have no way of fighting back against the HFY's superior technology. "I'm ready," Dr. Grant said one day, her voice steady despite the pressure. "We need to test this on a small scale first. If it works, we'll move forward. If not, well, then we'll know what we're up against." Ryan nodded. "Let's do it." The team set up the experiment in a small, secure facility. They selected a volunteer from the resistance, a soldier named Marcus, who had shown signs of mental resilience during past missions. He wasn't psychic, but he was determined and focused. If anyone could handle the strain of the device, it was him. Marcus sat in a chair, his body strapped in place to prevent any movement. Dr. Grant carefully attached the neural amplifier to his head, making sure it was calibrated correctly. The device hummed softly, its lights flickering as it powered up. The room fell silent as everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Dr. Grant spoke quietly. "Marcus, are you ready?" "Ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, his voice calm but with a hint of nervousness. He trusted Dr. Grant, but this was uncharted territory. No one knew what the amplifier would do to him. With a final nod from Ryan, Dr. Grant activated the device. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Marcus's eyes began to glow faintly. His body tensed, and a strange energy seemed to radiate from him. For a moment, the room was still, the air thick with anticipation. Then suddenly, a loud crackling sound filled the room, and the lights flickered. The device on Marcus's head hummed louder, and his breathing became more rapid. He clenched his fists as if struggling to control the overwhelming force inside him. The team watched in stunned silence, unsure whether the experiment was succeeding or failing. "I can feel it," Marcus gasped. "It's like something is inside my mind, pulling at my thoughts." Sweat poured down his face as he fought to keep control. Dr. Grant quickly adjusted the settings on the amplifier, trying to stabilize the flow of energy. "Steady, Marcus. Focus. You need to hold it together." Ryan's eyes were locked on Marcus, who was clearly fighting to maintain his grip on reality. The tension in the room was unbearable. For a moment, Marcus's body shuddered, and then, in a sudden burst of energy, he let out a cry and released a wave of psychic force. The force was unlike anything anyone had ever felt before. It was as if the room itself trembled under the power of his mind. The walls seemed to ripple, and the machines began to spark and malfunction. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the energy faded. Marcus slumped in his chair, breathing heavily. The room fell silent once more. Dr. Grant rushed over to check on him. "Marcus, are you okay?" He blinked, his eyes slowly returning to normal. I think so," he whispered. "But that was intense. I felt like I could control everything around me. It was like I could see their thoughts, feel their emotions." Ryan stepped forward. "Is it enough? Can we use this?" Dr. Grant didn't hesitate. "Yes, we can use this. If we can train more soldiers to harness this power, we can disrupt the Sharkey's psychic network. We can stop them from controlling their soldiers." The implications of what they had just discovered were enormous. Humans, with no inherent psychic abilities, had just unlocked a power that could change the war. The neural amplifier was their new weapon, one that didn't rely on technology or brute force, but on the human mind itself. The HFY, who had spent centuries perfecting their cold logic and control, were about to face something they had never encountered: the unpredictable, powerful force of human thought. Ryan felt a surge of hope. "This is our chance. We can strike back. We'll need to train more soldiers, but this is the key to winning." Dr. Grant nodded, but she knew that the path ahead would be difficult. The human mind was fragile, and the strain of using the neural amplifier could be dangerous. Not every soldier would be able to control the power, and the HRK would certainly find a way to fight back. But at least now, the humans had a fighting chance, and for the first time since the invasion began, they were no longer playing defense. They were ready to go on the offense. The first wave of soldiers who had undergone the neural training was ready. They were nervous, but determined. Their mission was clear: to infiltrate the Sharkey's strongholds and disrupt their communication network from within. It was risky, and many would not return, but it was their only chance. As the first team set off on their mission, Ryan stood with Dr. Grant, watching them leave. "This is it," he said quietly. "The beginning of the end." Dr. Grant smiled faintly. "Let's make sure it's the end of them." With that, the soldiers were off, their minds now their greatest weapon. The war was far from over, but the humans had a new strength. They had discovered the power of thought, and now they were ready to unleash it. The humans had finally found their weapon, the power of thought. They had unlocked something the HRK never expected. With their neural amplifiers, they could tap into a strength no machine, no alien force, could control. For the first time, the resistance felt they had a real chance at victory, but the HRK weren't going to give up easily. The first wave of soldiers had infiltrated the alien strongholds, using their newly gained psychic abilities to disrupt the Sharkey's systems. The plan was simple: find the central command hub, destroy the control systems, and throw the entire alien force into chaos. It was a dangerous mission, and the odds of success were low. But the soldiers were determined. They had been trained to use their minds in ways they had never imagined. General Ryan and Dr. Grant stood in the command center, watching the feed from the field. The team had entered the Sharkey's main fortress deep within their stronghold. The feed from their neural amplifiers showed the soldiers battling against the Sharkey's soldiers and machines. The soldiers weren't just fighting with weapons, they were fighting with their minds, disrupting the Sharkey's psychic communication systems. It was working. The Sharkey forces were confused, disorganized. For the first time in the war, the humans had the upper hand. But Ryan knew better than to get too confident. The Sharkey were smart. They would adapt. As the team advanced deeper into the fortress, They encountered heavy resistance. The XRK had begun to recover from their initial shock. Their psychic network had been disrupted, but the alien forces weren't without their own countermeasures. The XRK had developed their own psychic abilities, far more powerful than anything the humans had experienced, and they weren't going to let the humans win so easily. The team pressed on, using their amplified powers to fight back against the alien forces, but with every step they took, the XRK were closing in on them. They had learned from their earlier mistakes. They began adapting to the humans' tactics, countering their psychic assaults with their own. The battlefield was no longer just a place for physical combat. It was a mental war, a struggle for control over the very thoughts of the soldiers. "We need to move faster," Ryan shouted over the communication link, watching the feed from the front. "The longer we stay here, the more they'll adapt." Dr. Grant nodded, her mind racing. The neural amplifiers had given the humans a fighting chance, but they were still far from a match for the XRK's superior psychic abilities. If they didn't act quickly, the XRK would overpower them. Inside the fortress, Marcus, the soldier who had been the first to test the neural amplifier, felt the strain of the battle. His mind was a battlefield, under constant attack from the XRK's psychic defenses. His head throbbed, and the pressure was unbearable. He could feel the XRK trying to push into his thoughts, trying to take control of his mind. But he refused to give in. He gritted his teeth and focused, using the power of the amplifier to push back against the alien force. His hands trembled as he reached out, trying to locate the XRK command center in his mind. He had been trained to control his new abilities, but nothing could prepare him for the mental assault the XRK were unleashing. "Stay focused. We can win this. We have to." The thought repeated over and over in his mind, driving him forward. He wasn't alone. His comrades, soldiers who had once been ordinary people, now shared this mental battlefield. Each one of them was fighting the XRK on their own terms, using their minds as weapons. They knew that they could win if they stuck together, if they kept pushing. The XRK had underestimated the power of human resilience, but they were learning quickly. And soon, the humans would have to face an even greater challenge. "We've reached the control hub," Marcus reported, his voice strained but determined. "We're ready to take it down." Ryan's voice crackled through the communication link. "Do it, Marcus. Destroy their network." Marcus hesitated for a moment. The control hub was heavily guarded. If they destroyed it, they would risk triggering a full-scale retaliation from the XRK. But the alternative was worse. If they didn't act now, the XRK would regroup and crush them. He exchanged a glance with his team. They nodded in unison. They knew what had to be done. "Activating now," Marcus said, taking a deep breath. With a swift motion, he and the team set off a burst of psychic energy, aiming it directly at the control systems. The response was immediate. The entire fortress seemed to shudder, the walls vibrating as the psychic pulse slammed into the heart of the XRK's command center. For a moment, there was complete silence. The XRK were reeling, trying to regain control. But it was too late. The resistance had done it. The XRK's control over their forces was completely broken. Their soldiers, once unified and disciplined, were now scattered, confused, and vulnerable. The balance of power had shifted completely. But the victory didn't come without a price. The strain of using their mental powers had taken its toll on the soldiers. Marcus collapsed to the floor, his body shaking from the mental and physical exhaustion. His comrades weren't much better off. The neural amplifiers had given them power, but it came at a cost. Their minds, though stronger than ever, were fragile, and the psychic battle had left them drained. "We need to get out of here," Marcus gasped, barely able to stand. "Now." Ryan's voice came through again, this time with urgency. "Fall back. Get to the extraction point." The humans had won a crucial battle, but they knew this war was far from over. The XRK would not give up. They would regroup, they would adapt. But now, the humans had the upper hand. They had discovered the true power of the mind, and with it, they could fight back against the HFY's overwhelming force. As Marcus and the team made their way toward the extraction point, the weight of what they had accomplished began to settle in. The fight for Earth was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward victory. The HFY had underestimated them before, and now they had learned a painful lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The battle for control had just begun, but the humans were no longer fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The victory had been hard-earned, but the war was not yet won. The humans had dealt a significant blow to the HFY, disrupting their communication and control systems, but the alien forces were not defeated. They had adapted, just as the humans knew they would. The HFY were now desperate, and desperation made them more dangerous than ever. General Ryan knew this would be their final stand. Earth had no more time to lose. The remaining human forces were battered, exhausted, and few in number. Yet they had something no enemy could match: the human spirit. It was that spirit that had brought them this far, and it was that same spirit that would carry them through the final battle. Ryan stood in the command center, looking over the latest intelligence reports. The HFY had gathered their forces for one final assault on Earth. They had concentrated their remaining strength into a massive invasion fleet. This was it. The HFY were coming for Earth, and they would either destroy humanity or be driven back forever. "This is our last chance," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the weight of what was to come. "We have to hit them now, before they regroup completely. We'll take the fight to their mothership. We have to destroy it." Dr. Evelyn Grant nodded from across the room. She had been working non-stop on new ways to use the neural amplifiers, knowing that the HFY's psychic strength would be their greatest challenge. The neural amplifiers had proven effective, but they weren't enough on their own. The team had to strike directly at the heart of the enemy's command center. "We've come this far," she said, looking up from her console. "We have one shot. We're going to need every person we have left to make this work." The plan was simple but dangerous. They would use a small strike force to infiltrate the HFY's mothership, located in Earth's orbit. It was heavily protected, with advanced shields and elite soldiers guarding it. But the humans had something the HFY didn't. They had the ability to think, adapt, and learn. The Resistance had developed a new strategy. They would use their neural amplifiers to tap into the mothership's systems, not just to disable the HFY's forces, but to take control of the ship's very functions. If they could hijack the mothership's weapon systems, they could turn the HFY's most powerful weapon against them. As the humans prepared for their final assault, there was a sense of urgency in the air. The strike team, including Marcus, the first soldier to undergo the neural enhancement, was ready to board the shuttle that would take them into space. They knew this mission could be their last, but they also knew it was their only chance to win the war. "Are you ready?" General Ryan asked, looking at each member of the strike team. They were a mix of seasoned soldiers and new recruits, all determined to end the war. Marcus nodded, his face grim but resolute. "We'll give everything we've got," Marcus said, his voice steady. For Earth. The shuttle launched, cutting through the atmosphere and heading for the HFY mothership. It was a dangerous journey, and they knew they would be facing the HFY's full might. But the humans were not afraid. They had fought through impossible odds before, and they were prepared to do it again. As they neared the mothership, the scale of the alien ship became clear. It was enormous, dwarfing the human shuttle. But inside that vast, cold structure, the humans knew they had the advantage. The HFY might have superior technology, but the humans had learned to think differently, to use their minds in ways that even the HFY could not comprehend. "We're almost there," Ryan said as he piloted the shuttle closer to the mothership's docking bay. The shuttle sensors blinked to life, showing a clear path. There was no turning back now. "We'll infiltrate from the inside, disable their systems, and then take control of their weapons. Once we do that, we'll fire on their command center. The plan was set, and the team moved quickly, boarding the mothership's docking bay as stealthily as possible. The HFY had stationed guards, but the humans' new abilities allowed them to bypass the security systems. Marcus, using the neural amplifier, led the way, mentally reaching out to disrupt the HFY's sensors and communications. Once inside, the team split into two groups. One would sabotage the mothership's power systems, while the other would go after the weapons control. Time was running out, and the HFY would soon realize they were under attack. The humans had to move fast. As Marcus and his team reached the weapons control room, they encountered their first major obstacle. The room was guarded by several HFY soldiers, their eyes glowing with a strange alien light. The humans were outnumbered, but they were ready. Using their neural amplifiers, they sent out pulses of psychic energy, disorienting the soldiers and causing them to lose control. It was a struggle, a battle of wills, but the humans pushed forward. They had something the HFY couldn't counter: the ability to think beyond the alien tactics, to break free of the patterns that HFY relied on. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Marcus reached the central console. He placed his hands on the controls, his mind connecting with the ship's systems through the neural amplifier. The connection was overwhelming, but he focused, blocking out the distractions, and sent a pulse of energy into the mothership's core. The ship shuddered as its weapons systems powered down. A deep metallic groan echoed through the halls. The HFY soldiers, confused and desperate, tried to fight back, but it was too late. The ship was now under human control. "It's done," Marcus yelled into the comms. "We've taken control of their weapons." "Fire at their command center," General Ryan ordered, his voice filled with determination. Marcus, barely holding on to consciousness from the mental strain, did as ordered. With a final surge of psychic energy, he directed the ship's weapons at the HFY command center, just as the remaining human forces launched their final assault from Earth. The sky above Earth erupted in flames as the HFY's command center was destroyed. The shockwaves rippled across space, signaling the end of their invasion. As the mothership's systems began to power down, Marcus collapsed, exhausted but victorious. His team gathered around him, knowing that the war was finally over. The HFY had been defeated, their command structure shattered, and their forces scattered. The humans had won. General Ryan stood over the wreckage of the HFY mothership, his face grim but proud. Earth had survived, and humanity had proven that no force in the universe could break their spirit. They had fought not just with weapons, but with their minds, their willpower, and their unity. The war was over, but the lessons learned would never be forgotten. The HFY had underestimated humanity. And now, Earth stood victorious.